Why is it that so many of us are struggling today with our oral health, right? Well, it's remarkable. If I think about human evolution, something so important, you're calling the mouth the gateway to the rest of the body. You mentioned the link between fertility, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune illness, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. We mentioned some of the reasons we don't come and see the dentist, but what's going on in the modern lifestyle? Maybe we can talk about food, sugar, tea, coffee, all these sort of things. I mean, can you sort of walk us through the things that are helpful and the things that are potentially harmful if we don't pay attention?
Yeah, so I think, again, if you go into like the Stone Age times, there hasn't been much evidence to show that people had lots of decay or lots of gum disease. But they also didn't have hygienists and dentists, and they weren't getting root canals done. So what was so different about their diet compared to what we're doing now? And part of it is that they were having hard, chewy foods. They weren't having sugar. There was no processed foods. They were not snacking. They were eating as and when food was there. And then you come to our society now where a lot of our foods is processed. A lot of us do snack, and snacking is one of actually the worst things for the mouth in particular, because every time you snack, your saliva, the acidity of the saliva will become more acidic. And as the saliva becomes more acidic, then the teeth can demineralize and then you can get decay. So I always say to patients, you know, if you're a sweet tooth, I mean, obviously you can probably tell them that they shouldn't be having sugar. I will tell them that if they are going to have their sugar, have it all in one go, just once, and then have some water afterwards. And that is it. So if you have a bag of Skittles, I'd rather you ate the whole bag of Skittles in one go than you ate a Skittle every, 5 minutes or so. Because what happens is the saliva is not able to neutralize, and then it just stays in an acidic state. And that's when you start getting demineralization and decay.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, so just so no one misinterpreted that, you're not recommending that someone goes and has a whole bag of sweets, whatever that brand might be. But what you're saying is if you are going to, because the truth is some people are.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because people eat for a variety of different reasons, not just physical hunger. Emotional hunger is often a big driver of our eating habits. You're saying that sort of steady, constant drip of sugar throughout the day is not allowing your mouth to rebalance, basically. Exactly.
And that's the same with drinks as well. So if you're someone who has some sort of sweeteners or something in your water, or you're having fizzy drinks, we're all human, we all have bad things. In my opinion, that's how you have that bad thing and what you do to basically get back into a good and healthy state. So, if you're having your Coca-Cola, have it all in one go, don't sip it, and drink some water afterwards, and also drink it through a straw as well, the Coca-Cola.
Okay, there's so many little practical things you put in there. Let's go through them one by one. Okay, so sugar. Yeah. I think a lot of us know or are aware that sugar or excess sugar is not going to be helpful for our teeth.
Yes.
Okay, so sugar comes in a variety of different forms. You mentioned that we can drink sugar, which I don't think they were doing in traditional society.
Definitely
so we can drink a lot of sugar in a very short period of time. We can add sugar to our tea. Yeah. Or we can have sugar in sweets or a biscuit, whatever it might be. So let's just make it really clear for people, because everyone's got a different relationship with foods. Yeah. Maybe we'll start up with, a hot drink with sugar in it. Yeah. Through the lens of our dental health, we're not talking about diabetes or weight or anything like that. Through the lens of our dental health, is that okay?
So it has been shown that when the drink is hot and you've got the sugar inside it, then it also will exacerbate the acidity of the saliva. So it'll make it even more acidic, and it will be more difficult for that saliva to rebalance again. So
hold on, just so I'm clear. So let's say you had a hot beverage in front of you. Yeah. And you had on a teaspoon some sugar. Yeah. For your dental health, are you saying you're better off putting the sugar straight in your mouth and swallowing it and then having the hot drink separate? Are you basically saying that when the sugar's dissolved in the hot drink, it becomes more problematic?
Yes. Yeah. So that's been shown to be more problematic because it's hot, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Okay. What about fruit juice?
That's also pretty bad as well. Just even, and dried fruits as well. So again, that's where I guess there's kind of conflicting supporting arguments, because fruit juice and dried fruits are good for your general health, but they're actually quite bad for your dental health. So you should be following the same rules of, have it all in one go. Don't snack on it. So if you're having dried fruits, for example, I always recommend to mix it with maybe some nuts as well. So that roughage can help get rid of the whatever dried prune that is stuck in your teeth.
Okay, so let's say someone has indulged in something sweet for whatever reason. What is the best thing they can then do to reduce the potential problematic effects on their oral health, the teeth, their gums, the gut, not the gut bugs, the mouth bugs that we want in there? What are some helpful things that they can do?
So like I said, have it all in one go. Straight after, you can just rinse it with some water.
Straight after?
Yeah, straight after.
But they may not want to do that because they probably like the aftertaste.
And they're like, no, stay.
Yeah.
You can chew some sugar-free gum. And just by chewing sugar-free gum, it helps to stimulate your saliva. And that saliva will wash away whatever's stuck in your teeth, but also will help to neutralize the saliva quicker. There's also some really cool like mints and pastos, which have probiotics or have alkaline solutions to help neutralize the saliva as well. So you could even pop one of those in afterwards.
Okay. Let's look at this through another lens. We all live different lives. We all have different taste preferences. We have different times that we eat. But I don't know if you would engage in this thought experiment. What does the perfect day look like from a dental health perspective, right? And with the understanding that this may not be achievable, but I'm just wondering what might, not perfect, but really good dental health look like?
Okay, so you wake up in the morning. For some patients, they might be taking off their mouth tape. So that's something which is relatively newer that people are learning about.
To help encourage nasal breathing.
Exactly,
okay.
Yep. And stop introduction of bacteria and drying the mouth out. So they're taking off their mouth tape, or if they already breathe with their mouth closed, then fantastic. Wake up, and then they will go brush their teeth. And then afterwards, they might have some breakfast, ideally something which is not sugary. So maybe they're having just some porridge or some eggs. And then this is me, for example. So, and then I'm going to I have a coffee, and then I get to work. I usually will have a neutralizing mint at that point as well. So that just helps to freshen my breath. I am a dentist, so I want to make sure that my breath smells nice. But then also it just helps to neutralize everything. And then I will have lunch, rinse my mouth with water after I've had my lunch.
So you do that? That's interesting.
I actually do, yeah. And then I will have my dinner. By the way, I don't drink anything other than water during the day or coffee, so there's no sugar involved.
And I note that you're also not snacking in this on this
snacking.
ideal day.
Yeah, so I really try not to snack. And then I will have my lovely dinner, and then I'll wait a minimum of 30 minutes after my dinner before I go and brush my teeth. And usually I first will floss, and then I will brush my teeth. And then I will not rinse with water. I'll just spit out the toothpaste, no rinsing. And then I personally will pop in a probiotic pastil. So I have like a probiotic mint before I go to sleep. And that's that.
Okay, this is fascinating. Okay, thank you for sharing that, because I'm now trying to plot that out and what I could potentially apply. Okay, so let's just go through that, right? So mouth tape.
Yeah.
We have covered this before, but if people haven't heard my initial conversations with James Nestor and a few others about mouth tape, they may not be familiar. So we're talking about a practice that some people can do to help encourage them to breathe through their nose at night.
Yes.
Why is nasal breathing, and you sort of covered it, but just to make it super clear for people, why is nasal breathing through the night important for your oral microbiome?
So if you're breathing with your mouth open, you're introducing bacteria into your mouth for however many hours. But more importantly, your mouth dries out completely. And saliva is so, so, so important for oral health. And so people who have a dry mouth, be it because of medications they're taking or certain, medical issues that they have, it is really important for them that they try and lubricate their mouth as much as possible. Be it through mouth taping or whatnot. So it is really important for that. And we've actually seen a lot of patients, and this is just in my own clinic, who were originally mouth breathers. And we actually went and fixed their jaws completely, or their teeth and how they meet, through orthodontic treatment. So my sister's an orthodontist. So she'll fix that. And then they don't even need to mouth tape because their lips will close at rest in a much more comfortable way, and they don't breathe with their mouth open.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So sometimes the mouth breathing that many of us are doing at night is a consequence of our jaw placements.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And then we've also done microbiome testing of patients before and after they've had their orthodontic treatment or whatnot. And we've seen that there's been a really big improvement in their gum health, in obviously their saliva production, and also their oral microbiome as well.
This is fascinating. So again, drawing the analogy with our guts, people are so interested in what they can do to improve their gut health. Mm-hmm. And there are things you can do with your food, but there's also, things with your stress and sleep and movement that also impact our gut health, right? So the things that we can do to improve our oral health and the bugs, in our mouth that we want, simply going from mouth breathing to nasal breathing at night in and of itself is going to make a positive impact.
Yes, yeah. And I always recommend to patients that they start with mouth taping, and they'll probably feel a significant improvement in how their mouth feels, maybe how they're sleeping, their focus and concentration the next day. And if they do feel those significant improvements, they might be more inclined to go ahead and do maybe some orthodontic treatment to fix their teeth.
When my wife first did mouth taping, and I think it was after my second conversation with James Nestor on this podcast, because, she probably won't listen to my advice, but she'll listen to James giving that advice, which I think is the thing in all relationships. But when she did that, it was remarkable.
Really?
Yeah. She's like, I've got so much energy. The following day, after the first time, her energy was through the roof.
Wow.
Right. So for some people, it can be game changing.
Yeah.
But that was from an energy perspective. It's fascinating to me that can also improve the health of your oral microbiome, which kind of makes sense when you start to think about it, right? Yeah. Okay, you said you would on this ideal day, you'd brush your teeth straight away.
Yes. There's no real difference whether you brush your teeth before or after breakfast. For me, it really depends on what you're eating for breakfast. So if you're someone who's going to have an orange juice and you like your sugary cereal, then it's actually better to brush your teeth before you have your breakfast, because you shouldn't brush your teeth straight after having anything acidic or sugary. Otherwise, you grind it into your teeth.
So a lot of people wake up with bad breath. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the incentives for people to brush their teeth, I would say, is, yes, how it's going to look, but also they want their breath to smell nice, right? A lot of people will have coffee or tea in the morning. Mm-hmm. If they don't brush their teeth, I don't know, let's say they even have a glass of water when they wake up.
Yeah.
Are there bugs in the mouth that are maybe contributing to bad breath? Maybe we've been mouth breathing all night and we've got a slightly dysbiotic oral microbiome, so a slightly unbalanced one. If you then consume things like water or tea or coffee without brushing or rinsing your mouth, are some of those, inverted commas, problematic bacteria going then into your body? Or do we not know?
We don't know, or I don't know. What I do know is that most oral bacteria, a lot of them are not going to survive in the gut. So
stomach acid.
Yeah, it's the stomach acid. So it's only really like very, very bad bacteria from the mouth, which are even going to survive. And those bad bacteria are not going to just find themselves all of a sudden in the middle of the night and then be swallowed and cause a problem. That's much more of a slower, long burn.
So is the reason you think, or do you advise people brush their teeth straight away? Is that for any particular reason, or is it just habit? It's kind of be easy. You know, you get up, maybe you go to the toilet, you brush it at the same time, so it's done.
It's like, for me, it's more habit and whatever is easiest for the patient. Like I said, there's no real difference between brushing before or after your breakfast, as long as your breakfast is not a super sugary, acidic breakfast.
Okay, so there are some other cultural practices which I'm aware of that I think are relevant here. So in Ayurvedic medicine, which is traditional Indian medicine, there's two things that are often done. Number one, oil pulling. I don't know if you're familiar with this practice or not, where first thing in the morning, you would put some coconut oil in your mouth and swill it around for anything from, 2 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on how much you want to do it. Spit that out, rinse your mouth. And so I think, and I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner, I think the thinking is that you are removing some of those kind of impurities or the bad bacteria that are built up over the night before you start consuming things. The other practice that I think a lot of Indian families do is tongue scraping. So I remember mum and dad literally every single, they'd brush their teeth and it's a no-brainer. You just, you scrape your tongue afterwards with these metal tongue scrapers. And, when we go to India every other summer for 6 weeks, we'd come back, we'd go to the local market and come back with like 30 of these silver metal tongue scrapers, right? So I don't know, again, I don't know if these things have been studied or not. And if they haven't, it doesn't mean they don't work just because we haven't studied them. But I find it interesting that those practices do exist, certainly in Indian culture. I'm sure other cultures have their own practices as well. Do you know much about those two practices and their potential benefits? Yes.
So thanks for reminding me, because I actually would recommend tongue scraping, and that is part of my routine. So if we start with tongue scraping, it is actually very beneficial. You need to be quite careful with how aggressive and how often you scrape your tongue, because what can actually happen is if you tongue scrape too aggressively, you can cause overgrowth of the filiform or the buds on your tongue, and that can make your tongue, it's not very nice. It's called like a hairy tongue. So you can have a hairy tongue, black hairy tongue, and that can actually trap even more bacteria, and it's like this self-perpetuating cycle. So I would always recommend to patients that they do tongue scrape with the Ayurvedic metal tongue scraper, maybe a couple of times a week, not every single day, and not very aggressively. The coconut oil pilling one, I have a lot of patients who swear by it, and they say that it has changed their life. But if we look at the actual evidence behind it, there is no research that I'm aware of that shows that it has any, direct improvements to someone's oral health. And a lot of it is more anecdotal. But with that being said, like I said, a lot of my patients love it, and there's no harm. So all of this research has shown that there's no positive gain from it, but there's also no harm from doing it. And if you actually want to be doing coconut oil pilling correctly, you should really be doing it for, I think it's about 15 minutes. So for most of my patients, I don't recommend it, just because I like to keep things really, really like just brush your teeth twice a day, like as quick and easy as they can. And a lot of people can't do that for 15 minutes. But some people have found that it improves their hydration in their mouth. They say that their teeth feel whiter. They have less ulcers. So definitely, if you're listening and you want to try it out, go for it.
Have you seen then some studies looking at this?
There have been studies that looked at it, and they haven't found any statistically significant improvement in any oral health parameters. But there's also no negative to it either.
And it would be interesting to know what they actually studied and how long for. And I've got a few friends who are dentists, and a couple of them have said to me, anecdotally, the patients who have done it or do it regularly, their teeth look really good. Now, that doesn't mean it's that's doing it. There could be other practices, of course, as well. And again, my bias is that that's a practice that I've seen in my culture growing up and in my family. So it's fascinating, isn't it? Okay, so back to your perfect day. You have scraped your tongue, because it's one of those 2 occasions a week where you do it on this day. You've already mentioned that you try your best not to snack, and we've covered why that is. You also said that on this day that you would rinse your mouth after your lunch. Okay, why is rinsing your mouth after food such a good practice if you're able to do it?
Just helps get rid of the bacteria and the food. Sorry, it's just as simple as that. Just if you've got food stuck in your teeth or your mouth, you just rinse it out and it helps.
Yeah. Okay. Flossing. You
Yes.
said in the evening you floss before you brush your teeth.
Yeah.
Is that just preference or is there a reason for that?
So there is no real difference between if you were to floss before or after you brush. For me, over 30% of the bacteria in your is in between your teeth. So when you're flossing, you're getting rid of 30% of that. And there's always going to be some food and some stuff stuck in there. So I like to floss, get rid of all of it, and then I brush and then spit everything out. Whereas if you were to brush and then spit out your toothpaste and then you were to floss, then you just have to spit out again, and it's just not as easy. So I just find that I find that easier, and it's kind of weirdly quite nice to be like, and take everything out. So yeah,
because you also like to keep the toothpaste in afterwards.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So why do you keep it in?
So I always compare it to sunscreen. So if you were to spend 2 minutes putting sunscreen all over your skin and then you were to have a shower before you go out into the sun, then you've just washed off all the goodness and it's not going to do anything. So it's the same with brushing your teeth. You spend 2 minutes applying all that toothpaste onto your teeth. And then if you were to rinse out with water, then you're actually just removing all of the goodness from the toothpaste out of your mouth.
Is there a risk that some toothpaste, and I'm no expert on toothpastes, but is there a risk some of them have got harmful chemicals in that maybe are working in the short term to help our teeth look better, but they're not necessarily the sort of chemicals you might want for 8 hours overnight whilst you're asleep on your teeth?
So I would always try and avoid SLS in your toothpaste. So that's sodium lauryl sulfate, and it's a foaming agent. It makes toothpaste really foamy and nice, and everyone likes that. But actually, it's been shown to not be great for the microbiome. It can strip the soft tissues inside the mouth and make them more irritated and can cause ulcers as well. So you don't need that. But otherwise, just spitting out is enough. That you shouldn't have gotten all the toothpaste all over your tongue and your cheeks anyway. You should just be brushing your teeth, and spitting it out is more than fine.
And what's your take on mouthwash?
Mouthwash is good for some people, but not needed for most people. In my opinion, it really needs to be kind of prescribed by a dentist.
For a particular problem.
Exactly, for a particular problem, be it bad breath, gum disease. Sometimes if you have lots and lots of decay, sometimes we'll also give you a mouthwash for that.
Isn't the downside, though, that some of them are, well, I know some contain alcohol.
Yeah.
So, we mentioned at the start of this conversation the importance of a healthy oral microbiome, so a good balance of bacteria in our mouth.
Yeah.
Is there a risk that some of these mouthwashes are going to disrupt that balance?
Yes, it definitely can. And that's why it's important that it's only used by certain people if they have a certain problem. So, for example, in my clinic, we will test a patient's oral microbiome and we'll see exactly what bacteria they have high levels of. And I can recommend a mouthwash which would be more effective for that patient based on what bacteria they have. So we're not knocking out the whole microbiome and killing everything.
Again, trying to draw these analogies to sort of concepts that people are familiar with. Is that a bit like an antibiotic then, where you wouldn't just take an antibiotic every day to stop yourself ever getting ill?
Yeah.
Because we know that that's going to be problematic, right?
Yeah.
For your gut microbiome and all kinds of other things. But a doctor will prescribe it for a specific problem for a discrete period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think we need to start thinking about mouthwashes in a very similar way?
Yes, definitely. And even within that, no mouthwash that we recommend should have alcohol. I mean, at this point in day, like we shouldn't be having alcohol in any of our mouthwashes, and you can still get very effective mouthwashes without alcohol in them. But yeah, definitely it should be used if you have a problem to fix that problem. And if you are someone who just has maybe you just had something really garlicky and you're about to go on a date or something like that, fine, you can use some mouthwash, but you should use it like a perfume or an aftershave just to help freshen the breath once or twice when needed.
Because some people are having it twice a day. It's part of their dental care regime.
Yeah.
And I would say, although I haven't seen anything recently, I think sometimes these things are marketed like that, aren't they?
Yeah,
because
they
of
are.
course it's there's more sales if someone's using it twice a day than, once every 3 years when prescribed by a dentist.
Exactly. And also, even if you are going to be using mouthwash, it should be at a separate time to brushing. So going back to the toothpaste analogy of, sunscreen, if you were to brush your teeth and then you rinse with mouthwash straight after, then they actually kind of cancel out each other's effects, the toothpaste and the mouthwash, and you end up not really having anything. So if you do have to use mouthwash, you should use it at a separate time to your brushing. So I always recommend like at lunchtime. So after your meal, instead of rinsing out with water, rinse out with whatever mouthwash you've been recommended to use.
If we look at the health of the oral microbiome then, and the things we can do to improve it or keep it well, we mentioned food and drinks and some of the things that we can do, right, around that. We mentioned that nose breathing at night as opposed to mouth breathing is something that's going to have a positive impact. There are other things in our lifestyle that we know, for example, impact our gut microbiome. So, I talk about these 4 pillars of health and have done for many years: food, movement, sleep, and stress management, right? We know that all 4 of those independently impact the health of our gut microbiome. I wonder if we could just go through them through the lens of our oral microbiome. We've mentioned food, as I say. You mentioned nasal breathing, stress and sleep. Do we know what chronic stress does to the health of our teeth and our oral microbiome?
So stress definitely, it obviously increases your cortisol levels. And actually, one of the most tried and tested ways of testing your cortisol is through a saliva test, which shows that saliva is an extremely valuable diagnostic tool. That was just more of a fun fact. But actually, we're also seeing that if a patient is under a lot of emotional or even physical stress, then that can actually show itself within the mouth. A patient can start getting gum disease. You can get lots of ulcers. And it depends on what that stress is. So we do, at our clinic, we do a test. It's called collagen breakdown. So we've got lots of different types of collagen in our bodies. And our gums are made out of a certain type of collagen. And essentially, gum disease is collagen breakdown. But the problem with gum disease is by the time we can see it in your mouth or you're having problems, it's kind of too late and the destruction's already occurred. But we know from a biomolecular level that collagen breakdown is happening up to a year before in the saliva. So we test our patients for their collagen breakdown. It's a certain enzyme called AMMP8. We test for this enzyme constantly, every patient, and it kind of flags up patients who are at risk of gum disease, some sort of collagen breakdown. But also what it shows is a patient who's under potentially a lot of physical or emotional stress. And that was something that I found really wild.
Wow.
So we started doing it. I've probably been using this test for like 5 years now. Started using it just to test people for gum disease. And then I would get someone whose gums were actually really healthy, but they had really high levels of this collagen breakdown. I was like, I don't understand. And they were like, oh, I'm in the middle of chemotherapy or, one of the women, for example, perfect oral health, but she just lost her child. And those types of things can really have a massive impact on our bodies and definitely our mouths as well.
Yeah, fascinating. I guess chronic stress can also directly impact teeth and jaw clenching, tension and all that sort of stuff, as well as the kind of potential impacts on gut. I keep saying gut bugs, mouth bugs. Yes. And I guess that's one of your goals, isn't it? To get this more front and center of people's minds.
Yes. Yeah. I think the first thing is for people to acknowledge and respect their mouths more and understand that there's a really, really strong connection with the rest of their body. And I want, patients, I want doctors, everyone to understand that. Because I think that in our society, where chronic diseases and inflammation is just on the rise, we need to find the low-hanging fruit and the things which are easy to treat that can reduce our inflammation, like gum disease. But my ultimate goal is that one day we might be able to flag up patients who are at risk of systemic diseases through their mouths and through saliva testing.
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Hey guys, as you know, sleep is a crucial ingredient for our overall health and our longevity, yet these days, many people really struggle. 8 Sleep have a technology called the pod, which can be fitted to your existing mattress like a fitted sheet. And it will automatically cool down or warm up each side of your bed, which can be especially helpful if you have a partner, as you can both have the ideal temperature that you want. The pod can also detect snoring and automatically lift your head to improve your airflow, which hopefully will stop you snoring. If you want to give the pod from 8 Sleep a go, all you have to do is click on this link and use the code LIVEMORE to get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra, or you can click on the link in the description box below. It currently ships to United States, Canada, the UK, Europe, and Australia. Now, back to the conversation. You say that the mouth is the gateway to the rest of the body. What is it that most of us don't understand about the mouth that you would like us to know?
I think that for decades, we've always thought that the mouth is a completely separate entity to the rest of the body. So doctors and dentists go to different universities, they study different things, and doctors are kind of like, oh, that's a mouth issue, that's for the dentist. And the dentist is like, oh, that's an arthritis issue that has nothing to do with me. But actually, if you rewind from long before, Hippocrates actually thought that there was a really strong connection between the mouth and the rest of the body. And he actually claimed that he took a tooth out and he helped improve someone's rheumatoid arthritis. So at that time, we knew that there was a connection. But then there's been this kind of separation between medicine and dentistry because of universities and the way that we've been trained. And I think in the most recent kind of 5 or 10 years, there's more and more research starting to come up that actually, if you want to improve your general health, you have to factor in your oral health. And if you have, for example, something like gum disease, you also need to be looking at other systemic conditions that could be connected to it.
There's so much to unpack there that we'll get to throughout this conversation. Just to really ground this for people at the start, what kind of physical health conditions that people may be familiar with can be linked to the health of our mouth?
So I'd say the most researched one is diabetes. So there's a very strong bidirectional relationship between diabetes and gum disease, but also things like cardiovascular disease, even chronic kidney disease, infertility, Alzheimer's, arthritis, a lot of other inflammatory conditions, and the list goes on.
Cancer as well?
There has been some promising research, particularly for colorectal cancer, where they found a specific oral bacteria called Fusobacterium nucleatum in over 50% of patients who have colorectal cancer. And they're finding also specific strains of that bacteria, which are making certain cancers more pathogenic and more aggressive.
Okay. So the health of the mouth linked to lots of different conditions that you've mentioned. Okay. So let's get to where most people, I think, are in society with how they view their health and their oral health. Okay. So they might go, as you've said, go and see the doctor for their physical health and maybe their mental well-being as well. But you go somewhere separately for your teeth, and many people are scared of going to dentists.
Yeah.
Many people don't go as often as perhaps they should. But I think, or I'd like to think that most people, and perhaps you could enlighten me on this, I think most people are brushing their teeth twice a day, 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. Is that true?
No, actually, unfortunately, it isn't. So gum disease or periodontal disease is the 6th most prevalent inflammatory condition in the world. And the World Health Organization came out quite recently saying that actually gum disease is entirely preventable, but it affects over 3.5 billion people in the world. And over 10% of the global population has periodontal disease. So I don't think people are brushing twice a day, or if they are, they're not doing it correctly. Because another issue is that the way that we get taught how to brush our teeth and take care of our mouths are often passed on by our parents. And if our parents don't have very good habits, then they'll pass that on to us. And unfortunately, dental professionals, a lot of them are not necessarily teaching people how to brush their teeth. And even when I'm like, can I show you how to brush your teeth? People are like, I know how to brush my teeth. I'm like, but you actually don't. And you're not brushing for 2 minutes. You're not spitting out the toothpaste and not rinsing with water. And so a lot of people actually don't know how to do it properly.
Yeah, this is super fascinating. So let's go into this, because a lot of the things that I talk about on this podcast are, yes, they're health related. They're about the simple things that we can all do each day that are going to have a huge impact on our short-term and our long-term health. Now, let's take the topic of nutrition, for example, which of course is relevant to the mouth. I've often wondered if one of the problems is that we have so many nutrition experts these days, i.e., in a different time where we didn't have all of this ultra-processed food and convenience foods, we didn't really get educated on nutrition. We just ate what our families and our cultures ate.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'd learn the good principles of healthy eating from our family and what we saw growing up. And you're saying that that's in some ways similar, whereby we observe how our parents and our family and the people around us when we were kids looked after their teeth, and we learned that. So I grew up in an Indian family, and many Indian families eat with their hands. And I remember mum and dad, after eating, would always rinse their mouth, because you eat with your right hand. Okay, they'd finish eating, and so then you put the plate in the sink, they'd wash their hand, and as part of the washing the hand process, they'd put water in the palm of their hand, and they'd rinse 2 or 3 times. The more I've learned about oral health over the last few years, I think, wow, that's actually a pretty phenomenal practice, because you're taking the food out, all those remnants, straight away after each meal. So, what's your take on that cultural practice that I observed growing up?
I actually think that there are some cultures who they knew how to do things without maybe even knowing that they were doing it well. And like, that's amazing. I didn't even know that. But even now, we often recommend to patients that if they're having like a bad treat or something like sugary or acidic, that they rinse their mouth out with water or even mouthwash, but they never actually go and brush their teeth. Because if you go and have something super acidic and then you run to the bathroom and you brush your teeth, you're just going to grind all that acid into your teeth. So rinsing with water is actually perfect.
You said 3.5 billion people on the planet have some form of gum disease.
Yep.
That's almost half the world's population. Why is it? What's going on in the modern environment that means so many of us are struggling?
It's a big question to answer. I think it's multifactorial. I think one is potentially lack of education on how to take care of your gums well, because as the World Health Organization said, it is entirely preventable. The second is, again, like you said, a lot of people don't necessarily acknowledge or appreciate how important their oral health is for the rest of their body. So they might not prioritize going to the dentist, spending money, going and having a hygiene. The number of patients I see where I'm like, you should be having a hygiene a minimum every 6 months. And they're like, that's a waste of money. I'm like, but it has such a strong impact with everything else.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? Whereby when we think about health, we might persuade ourselves, I know physical activity is good for me. I keep hearing all these longevity experts telling me it's the most important thing. And you might go, actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to sign up and join the gym, let's say, right? So there's a model in society for making that connection, isn't there? Where we go, oh yeah, muscle strength is important. As we get older, we must do some resistant exercise. I can justify signing up for a gym. Now, depending on where you live, obviously gyms can range anything from 15 quid a month to maybe 100 quid a month, maybe even more for some real high-end ones.
Yeah.
How much is a standard hygienist appointment-ish privately? And I know you work in London, but across the country, do you know roughly?
I would say from what I have seen, it can vary between £50 to maybe the highest I've seen is like 100 or actually 200. So depending on where you are in the country, if it's NHS or if it's private.
But not incomparable. If that was done twice a year, not incomparable to, gym membership or maybe cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's been so much research to actually show that even, for example, just one professional hygiene, it can reduce your levels of inflammatory markers. If you have diabetes, it can reduce your blood glucose levels or your HbA1c.
And just from seeing a hygienist?
Just from seeing a hygienist and having a regular hygiene, because a lot of people also, they think that a hygiene is more of an aesthetic, cosmetic treatment. It's just to remove stains and to make them feel fresh. But actually, you're reducing someone's bacterial load, you're reducing their inflammation, and you're reducing these retentive factors. So things like calculus, that hard stuff that you get on the insides of your teeth, that is trapping lots of plaque and bacteria and causing that inflammation.
Okay, so when you say a hygiene, this is going to see a hygienist to get your teeth cleaned. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you said something very interesting there. Well, you said more than one thing very interesting there. Okay, the first thing is that we think about our teeth and our gums through the lens of looks.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, again, just to draw the analogy with physical health, a lot of people initially are bothered about going to the gym or working out for vanity reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I get that. I totally get that. Right. But people are learning more and more that it's not just for vanity. It's not just to have a lean body or a body that you like the look of. It's also important for your hormones, for your longevity. And so we can draw that analogy again, can't we, with our teeth? It's so much more than just having nice teeth that look good, which of course everybody wants. It's so much more than that. So let's talk about the oral microbiome, right? Because everyone who listens to my show, I think by now is quite familiar with the gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. There's also an oral microbiome that you are, I would say, one of the leading experts in, from what I can tell. So can you explain what is the oral microbiome? And then let's start to unpick how the health of the mouth, for example, can impact your blood sugar control.
So the oral microbiome is the second largest and most diverse microbiome after the gut. People actually say that they're extensions of each other. And the oral microbiome has over 700 different bacteria in it, which make up 2 billion bacteria. What's quite interesting about the oral microbiome is that within the same mouth or ecosystem, let's call it, you have lots of different environments. So if you think about the bacteria that would want to live under the gums or on the teeth or at the back of your throat, they're very different environments. Some are hot, cold, different proteins. And so therefore you get different mini environments within the same ecosystem with lots of different types of bacteria. So it's a very highly variable microbiome, and it is quite strongly associated with the rest of the body because you can swallow bacteria. It can travel actually through your blood via your gums, or it can be inhaled as well. Wow.
So type 2 diabetes, you said, if someone has that, or if, let's say, even if they don't, right? I guess I'm trying to help people understand. You said before that actually if you go and see a hygienist, it could potentially improve your blood sugar control.
Yes, yeah.
So I think that's brand new information for a lot of people.
Yeah. So they've actually done a study. It was mainly for patients who had periodontal disease at this point.
Okay.
And they found that by treating the patient's periodontal disease, who also had type 2 diabetes, their HbA1c reduced by 0.4%, which
that's a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, for
that's
a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's nothing. I'm like, no, that's the equivalent of a patient having a second medication put on top to help reduce their HbA1c levels.
Yeah, or depending on where you are, that could take you from being pre-diabetic to no longer being diabetic.
Yeah,
so it's pretty profound, 0.4.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we know how this works?
So there's a couple of different kind of mechanisms. A lot of it's to do with reducing your inflammatory load. So your mouth and your microbiome, if you have gum disease, what happens is that you have high levels of certain bad bacteria and they release inflammatory markers. And those inflammatory markers can travel through to the rest of the body and cause something we call low-grade chronic inflammation. So it's this kind of constant firing of inflammation from the mouth elsewhere to the rest of the body. And it's been shown that it has a strong impact with your blood glucose levels and helping to regulate it as well.
If we just look at this through the lens of blood sugar, it kind of relates to what you said right at the start of this conversation, which is we've for far too long kept the body and the mouth separate. What's really interesting there for me is that in that study, they already had pre-existing problems in the mouth, right? So that was potentially driving inflammation around the body. And so when you correct that, you start to, correct other issues in the body that are also coming from that inflammation, and that could be blood sugar control.
Yeah.
We see similar things, don't we, with the gut microbiome? A lot of the research over the last 10 or 15 years has been very much about how, wow, we're now seeing that a unhealthy gut microbiome, for want of a better term, because I think we're still trying to define what that actually is, is linked with all kinds of different things. Alzheimer's, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, depression, skin problems, all those things. And for me, it just speaks to this wider point, which is the body is interconnected.
Massively. Yeah. And I think for one day, not yet, but one day, we will connect the oral, gut, vaginal, urine, all the microbiomes, and we will actually understand what true health is, because it's a complete symbiosis and ecosystem. And in my opinion, you can't have a balanced gut microbiome if your oral microbiome is imbalanced. And you can't have a balanced vaginal microbiome if your gut microbiome, it all has to be balanced for it to work properly.
And then following on from that, then through the lens of just blood sugar, how can we properly look after our patients with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes if we're not also addressing their oral health?
100%. Yeah. And I think that one of the issues that I see is actually from the medical profession. A lot of them are not aware that periodontal disease is such a big risk factor for diabetes and complications. So actually, we now say that periodontal disease is the 7th complication of diabetes after your, diabetic foot and your nephropathy and neuropathy, all of those things. Gum disease is also one, and it's bidirectional. So if you have diabetes, you're at a much higher chance of getting gum disease. And if you have gum disease, you're at a much higher chance of getting diabetes.
The gut-brain axis is something we often talk about on this show, this bi-directional communication between gut and brain.
Yep.
And I had Emily Leeming on a few weeks ago, microbiome expert, who was saying that it looks as though 90% of the messages in this gut-brain axis are going from the gut to the brain, and only 10% are down from the brain to the gut. I've been diving into your research over the past 24 hours or so, and it's really fascinating. And it made me think that as we think about gut-brain axis, we perhaps should be thinking about mouth-brain axis as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even oral gut-brain axis as well.
Yeah. So do we have any research so far as to what it means, that the health of our mouth, how that relates to our brain health?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of research, particularly in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, on cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and, again, periodontal disease. So what a lot of research is finding is that patients who have Alzheimer's, they've looked at their cerebrospinal fluid, and they have found a specific oral bacteria called Porphyromonas gingivalis in over 97% of these patient samples, compared to healthy patients where they don't have that oral bacteria in their cerebrospinal fluid. And if we actually zoom into this bacteria, so P. gingivalis, we see that P. gingivalis is a very aggressive, not a nice bacteria. And there are some strains of that bacteria which can release what we call virulence factors. And they're basically, it's kind of like a bad guy shooting something out of the gun, and it's bad things that they're shooting out, basically. So these virulence factors have also been found to be much higher in patients who suffer from Alzheimer's. And these virulence factors specifically are called gingipanes. And again, gingipanes have only been found in patients who suffer from Alzheimer's and periodontal disease in their cerebrospinal fluid. So this is more of an association or correlation. There has been a lot of research to look more into the causation between potentially Alzheimer's and gum disease. And one which I think does start to show it is, okay, fine, you already have Alzheimer's, but would actually improving your periodontal health or your gum health reduce your cognitive decline. And so this study looked at patients who already had Alzheimer's. They had half the group who had gum disease and the other half that did not have gum disease. And they followed them for 6 and 12 months. And they found that the patients who had gum disease and Alzheimer's had a much more rapid cognitive decline than those who didn't have gum disease.
It's so fascinating. There's a neurologist in America called Professor Dale Bredesen, who has done some quite remarkable research on Alzheimer's and early stage cognitive decline, and can this be reversed? And he has shown that in some individuals, if you take a different approach to what is the standard medical approach, you can actually get some pretty outstanding outcomes. I've actually spoken to some of the patients and families and seen and gone and helped him actually on this immersion about, 6-7 years ago. It's really quite remarkable. One of the things he would look at and make sure we're addressing is their oral health.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really good because I think you're doing a great job, I think, at bringing light to this research, and hopefully by you coming on here and sharing it, it's going to get to more people. I think there are some quite progressive clinicians around the world who've known for a number of years that there is a strong link. And so Dale's approach with Alzheimer's, for example, is he would say the standard medical model is to try and hit these symptoms with one approach, a drug. And he's not saying that that can't work. He's saying, or he said, and I don't want to misspeak for him today, that let's say you've got a leaking roof in your house. And he says in Alzheimer's, they've identified 36 possible leaks, right? So he says using just one drug is like trying to address that leak by just addressing one of the holes. And so his approach is, let's address as many holes as we can, and let's see if we can get a threshold effect where this starts to improve someone's cognitive decline. So that might be they address diets, they might address, ketone production and all kinds of different things, right? Toxic load in the body, addressing all of those things, and also your dental health.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard about any of this work or not.
I have actually. And also, so there's a charity called Food for the Brain, which I'm an advisor for, and I'm their mouth representative. And they're doing quite similar work as well, where again, they're showing that Alzheimer's is a multifactorial disease and just one drug is not going to treat it. But also what I find quite unique about oral health out of those risk factors is that it is entirely preventable and you can change it. So for example, if you go and you check your genetics and you find out that you have the APO4 gene, you can't really change much about that. But if you were to go and look at your oral health and you find out that actually you have gum disease, or you also maybe have really high levels of Porphyromonas gingivalis, this bad bacteria, then okay, I need to reduce that and I need to get rid of maybe that Porphyromonas gingivalis. And there are ways to do it. You can test your microbiome. You can go see your dentist and see if you have gum disease.
Do you sometimes find it difficult to find time to fit wellness into your life? I know many of us do. We feel our lives are too busy. Boncharge are a wellness brand who have a fantastic range of products to help you feel better, sleep better, and live better. And I've been using many of their products for well over 5 years now. And what I love the most is that they don't require me to find extra time in my life. I think their blue light blocking glasses are some of the highest quality out there. I've been wearing them for years in the evening, also when I go traveling. I also love their infrared sauna blanket, which is much cheaper and more accessible than having a sauna in your own house. It's really easy to set up and you can have a quick 30-minute session whilst relaxing, reading or watching television. And this sauna blanket is going to help you with recovery, relaxation and sleep. Boncharge are giving my audience an incredible 20% off everything on their website. All you have to do is go to boncharge.com/livemore and use the coupon codes livemore to get your 20% off, or just click on the link in the description box below. I've been sort of super fascinated in gut health, maybe since, 2012. So really keeping an eye on the research and seeing what's happening. And what's been really interesting to me is seeing how things have evolved. So things that we thought were problematic in the guts, let's say blastocystis hominis, for example, right? I remember the school of thought maybe 8-9 years ago was if you do your gut microbiome, do a stool test, get it examined, and there's blastocystis hominis, many practitioners would try and kill that. Yeah. They go, actually, this is the problem. We don't want this parasite in your gut. But over the years, the school of thought has started to evolve and going, actually, it seems as though that can be helpful for some people at reducing their risk of autoimmune disease. So I guess my question is, where are we at the moment with the state of research in the oral microbiome? Because I've seen things change a lot with gut health and what we think is good and what we don't think is good. Like even this idea that a diverse gut microbiome is healthy. Yeah. When I spoke to Emily, I said, how do we actually know that? Do we know for sure that that is the case? And I think there's a lot we still don't know. So where do you think we are currently with what we know about oral health and the oral microbiome?
I think it's a great question because I think that gut microbiome is ahead of the curve. It's the one that's had a lot more attention compared to the oral microbiome. And in terms of the oral microbiome, it's quite similar. We don't still fully understand whether or not a diverse microbiome is healthier than a undiverse microbiome. And so a lot of research teams, including my own team, we have a lab and we're doing a lot of research. We're actually trying to look at clinical parameters. So we're looking at patients, we're seeing what is healthy in their mouth and then kind of pairing that to their oral microbiome. And what we have started to realize is that it's not just necessarily the balance or ratio of bacteria in your mouth, which will dictate whether or not it's healthy. It's also to do with certain strains of bacteria. So me and you, we can have the same bacteria, but I might have a very virulent, aggressive strain, which is releasing loads of virulence factors. And you might have a very, very good, non-pathogenic, very good bacteria. So we need to go strain level. And the second thing, which I think is the most important, is that it's also how your body responds to that bacteria. So it's that host immune response element to it. So again, me and you, we can have exactly the same oral microbiome and have all the same bacteria, but I might end up having terrible gum disease and lots of decay, and you might be completely fine. And we see this a lot where we see patients who say, I brush 5 times a day and I take such good care of my mouth, but I have terrible gum disease. And that missing link is those genetic mutations. It's that host immune response and how inflammatory that person is. So I might have the smallest amount of bad bacteria. I might take very good care of my hygiene, but my body responds in a very aggressive way, which has been determined by my genetic makeup.
Wow, super interesting. So you do a lot of oral microbiome testing.
Yeah.
If you had never seen a patient, but you got their results, do you think that you know enough about the oral microbiome now to actually start building up a picture of who that patient is and what they might look like? Or is that we're not quite there yet?
We're definitely not there yet for systemic diseases, so things like cognitive issues or diabetes or heart disease through the oral microbiome. It's something that a lot of people are working on at the moment. In terms of oral diseases, like your gum disease or your decay or even bad breath, I think that we are actually in a good place where we can, I would not say diagnose, but we could definitely flag up people who are at risk of gum disease or decay. And there has been a ton of research to show that there are certain bacteria which we know cause gum disease or we know cause decay. So, for example, at our lab, we have been working for 2 years nearly on building an algorithm. So we actually have built an algorithm where we incorporate the patient's dental history, what they do at home, how much they're brushing, flossing, their age, their medical history, as well as the bacteria they have, the genetic mutations, the inflammatory markers, all together to then give them a risk, of their oral diseases. And I wouldn't say, I don't have like a specificity of saying, okay, we're 100% accurate. But the way that we've done it is by testing all of our patients and then seeing, okay, were we right with our prediction or were we not? Mm-hmm. So I would say we are very much on our way to getting there for oral diseases.
There's a phrase, something like what gets measured gets addressed, or something like that, right? So I guess when I hear about this oral microbiome test, I'm thinking, let's say someone doesn't have any toothache or any overt symptoms from their mouth, which is encouraging them to go and, change their lifestyle or change their diet or go and see the dentist or the hygienist.
Yeah.
If they had an oral microbiome test that showed, there's a few issues here, I wonder if that might be a good way going forward for some people to start taking their oral health seriously.
Yeah, so we've actually just got our preliminary results. We did a questionnaire, like a survey, and we sent it out to everyone who's done our oral microbiome test. Just to say, like, how likely were you to go and book an appointment with your dentist or your hygienist after getting your results? And we had an over 90, I think it was a 95% success rate, which had gone to the dentist within 1 month of taking the test or getting their results, basically. And I think that shows that, I think the issue with oral health as well is that it's always been something that dentists know, and we kind of tell our patients what's wrong, and patients don't understand what is going on. So we're like, you need 3 fillings, you need 1 root canal, and you've got gum disease. And patients are like, but why do I have all of these, cavities, and how did I get gum disease?
Yeah.
And they don't understand that gum disease is it's a bacterial infection. It is increasing your inflammation, and it's traveling through the rest of their body. They just think it's something cute,
This is so fascinating to me, right? So, because as I'm hearing all of this in my head, I'm sort of superimposing it on other principles that I try and adopt and share with people. So let's go through this in real time, right? I'm thinking that, let's take blood sugar, because we mentioned that already. And metabolic health is a topic that I've covered on multiple occasions and will continue to cover on multiple occasions because it's so important for our short-term and our long-term health. Okay, so I've shared many times that one of the issues I have with the way that we practice medicine today is that the way we report results is very black and white. Mm-hmm. And we don't recognize as a profession enough, or we certainly don't inform our patients enough, that health exists on a continuum.
Yeah.
So let's take average blood sugar. You mentioned HbA1c before, and you shared that study where if they had periodontal disease and they treated it, on average, their A1C went down by 0.4, which is remarkable. Okay, so just to ground people, in the UK, if your HbA1c, which is your average blood sugar marker for the past 2 to 3 months, is 6.5 or above, we call that type 2 diabetes. 6 to 6.5, that's pre-diabetes, and under 6 is considered normal. Now, I would argue that 5.9 is anything but normal. It may not be in the pre-diabetic range, but we should not be reporting it as normal, but it commonly is. Mm-hmm. Right. So if we try and use that model for what you're saying, is there a similarity with dental problems? So by the time you have gum disease, that's like your A1C is 6.5 or above. Right? So, now you've got a problem. I'm going to come and see Dr. Sampson and get this sorted. But are there earlier indications which are showing us, actually, you don't have gum disease yet, but things aren't where they should be? Yeah. Does that analogy work?
Yeah, fully. I actually love it. I think we should start using it more. We should say, like, your pre-periodontal disease.
Yeah.
Or like, so yes, you're totally right. Periodontal disease is kind of like a spectrum, I call it. So on one side, you've got super healthy, everything's amazing gums. And then on the other side is you've got severe periodontal disease. Your teeth are falling out. You've lost all of your bone. It's really bad. But actually along that spectrum are lots and lots of different types of kind of gum disease, where it starts as healthy gums, then it becomes inflamed gums. So that's the patient who brushes their teeth and their gums bleed a little bit. At that point, they should be thinking, this isn't great, I should go and see their dentist. And if they don't go and see their dentist, then that will progress and they'll get even more gum inflammation. And if that still isn't addressed, then that becomes gum disease. And the gum disease, what marks it is that you start getting bone loss. So it's not just gum inflammation anymore. You're actually also losing bone around the teeth. And as you lose that bone around the teeth, the gum disease progresses and gets worse and worse, eventually resulting in tooth loss. The annoying thing with gum disease is the only real, I would say, early warning sign is bleeding gums, which a lot of people don't think is a warning sign, and they should think that it is.
How common is bleeding gums?
Very, very, very common. I don't know the exact statistic, but I would say it's definitely over 80% of patients will have experienced bleeding gums at some point.
Is that patients who come and see a dentist? So in your experience, about 80% of your patients have complained of bleeding gums? Or do you think even across the general population, it might be something as high as that?
I think across the general population, they will have experienced bleeding gums at some point in their life, yes.
And you're saying that bleeding gums, generally speaking, should not happen?
No. I mean, if you had your eye was bleeding, you'd probably be a little bit worried, right? You'd probably go and see your doctor. Or if your foot, your nail kept on bleeding and there was pus coming out of it, you probably want to get that sorted out. But when it comes to the mouth, we often don't know if we have pus coming out of our gums because you can't really taste it very well. And bleeding gums, people think is just entirely normal.
Why is it, do you think, that if we had, a bleeding eye, we go and see the doctor, but we don't with the bleeding gum? What is there a PR problem with dentistry? Is it the fear that many people have when their kids are going to the dentist? What is it? Because when you put it like that, it's quite obvious. A part of your body is bleeding.
Yeah.
There's no obvious cause for it, like a cut, which we understand. Oh, I cut my foot, it's going to bleed.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that for our mouth?
I don't know. I think it is. It is a PR problem. I think dentistry needs to hire a very good PR firm.
That's what you're here for.
That's what I'm here for.
You're doing PR for dentistry.
But I think it's a lack of importance. People don't think that your mouth is that important. And then on top of that, I think people don't trust their dentist. They're scared of their dentist. So they're like, oh, it's bleeding, I'll just brush harder. Or I'll just start using mouthwash.
Why are people scared of the dentist?
I think that stems from, there's a big thing about vulnerability. And I know a lot of people feel extremely vulnerable when they're in a dental chair and they're laying back and they've got someone else's hands in their mouth. It's a very invasive thing. And it doesn't help that in the previous decades, dentists were seen or known to be pretty heavy-handed, and there have been some bad experiences for patients. And it still happens to this day, I'm sure. But I think that, I've heard some terrible stories from patients now who are like, oh, when I was 10 years old, every time I went to the school dentist, I'd have a tooth taken out, or I would have a filling and there was no anesthetic. And so they get that in their head. They teach it to their kids. And I see it all the time where these parents are like, oh, no, you're going to the dentist. Like, you'll get chocolate afterwards. I'm like, no, you're teaching your child to think that the dentist is a bad thing. And we can be great. We can be really fun sometimes.
You want fun? Go to the dentist.
There we go. So we can be a real party if you give us a chance.
But that's a really good point, actually. It's a really good point that I think people don't think about enough. And I go into this area with caution because I know it's what you just said there has so many implications. As a parent, what are we teaching our kids? What do I want my kids picking up from me? I don't want them picking up all the kind of insecurities I may have had. I actually don't want that for them. Yeah. And so that was my biggest drive to actually change a lot of this stuff. And so let's go back to dentistry then. People are scared to go, often because of that. Why? What are some other reasons? I mean, do you see people sometimes who come to you for the first time and you see the state of their mouth and you're like, how come you weren't here 5 years ago? Do you sometimes see mouths in a pretty awful state?
Yeah, I had one patient quite recently, and the weird thing about him was that on the outside, he was so well dressed. I mean, amazing. 3-piece suit. I mean, like beautiful. Tie, everything. And he comes in and he probably hadn't gone to the dentist in like 20 years. He smoked like 40 cigarettes a day. And he basically didn't really have any teeth left. And his teeth had fallen out. And sorry, this is a bit gross for some people, but he would then put the tooth back into the hole that it was in previously so that when he was talking to people, it looked like he had teeth, but he couldn't eat. And he would always eat at home or without people, and he would take all of the teeth out of his mouth and eat. And so I think this is just such a prime example of someone who clearly takes very good care of themselves. And, aesthetics are quite important to them, but they are terrified of the dentist. And I think it's a self-perpetuating cycle where they think that the dentist is going to judge them. So then they keep on not going, and then it gets worse and worse. And they don't really trust us either.
That's a great point. Fear of judgment, right?
Yeah.
Because if you know you haven't been looking after your teeth particularly well, for whatever reason, or you've been indulging in a bit too much sugar for whatever reason, right? Which many people do, especially when they're stressed. Maybe that fear of judgment stops people going as well, because they're like, I actually don't want that dentist to look. I never really thought about this. Very vulnerable, isn't it? You're opening that part of your mouth that nobody gets to see, really.
Yeah. I think the number of patients who have cried in my chair, who have gum disease, and I think they think that it's their fault. They've been blamed by others, by other dentists or hygienists, and being like, you're not brushing well enough, you're not taking care of your mouth. And I think it stems much larger than that, of how that patient was educated, and whether or not they had the money to go see the dentist. So there's so many factors that could cause that patient to be in that place, and it's unfair to be judged for that. But it is an extremely emotional thing. And actually, one of my patients once, she said, she was like, every part of your body, if you have a problem or you have some sort of trauma, you can hide it. But in your mouth shows so much. You can actually get a lot of trauma and scars, and we can always see it. So for example, if a patient was bulimic when they were younger, I can see that, I know that. If they maybe didn't have a childhood where they ate very good food and they weren't taking good care of their teeth, they will have lots and lots of decay and lots of fillings. And so it's interesting, because you can tell a lot from someone's mouth. And I think that some people do feel like they're going to be judged for that.
If we think about this through an evolutionary lens, do we know the state of dental health in more traditional societies? So if we look at through the lens of the gut microbiome, we'll often talk about the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, whose lives are still relatively untouched by modernity. So gut microbiome researchers will go there and study and look at their stool and see what's going on. And yes, we see that actually a lot of them have much more diverse microbiomes than we do in Western urban populations. Has that been done yet for our oral microbiomes? Like, do we know the state of their health? Because it's striking to me that nearly half the planet have some form of gum disease. I imagine that wasn't the case in traditional societies, or was it?
So in terms of oral microbiome studies, there have been a lot to compare different societies. For example, just even comparing different diets in different countries, more westernized diets versus others who are not. So yes, we have been able to compare that. But what I'm not aware of is studies from maybe communities which are very non-industrialized or haven't had kind of more processed foods in their diet. There has been a lot of research by a guy called Weston Price, and he did show that there was a significant change in the mouths of people who were in areas which were less industrialized compared to areas which were. So they had twins, for example, one who was having lots of kind of processed foods versus the other twin who was not having processed foods. And the way that their jaws developed, the amount of decay that they had were massively different. Yeah,
it's remarkable, isn't it? Because if you think about a lot of these ultra-processed foods, they're softer, they're easier to chew, right? So that if we think about it, we know, for example, our bone density, let's say in our legs, is going to be heavily influenced by the amount of pressure you're putting through, walking, running, jumping, all these things are putting pressure on the bone and the bone's growing back stronger. Yeah. And I guess if your child is having a lot of soft, mushy, ultra-processed foods, they're not getting that kind of mechanical stimulus to the jaw and the teeth.
Yeah.
Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah. So they're showing that the jaw is not developing as much because you're not using the jaw under the pressures that it's meant to. So even it goes from as early as like breastfeeding to even as they grow older, whether or not they're having processed foods. And so a lot of people are now trying to teach their children to eat harder foods. I've even seen like there's these gadgets that they're giving their children to like chew on so that they like develop their jaws. I would not go that far. I think just make sure that your child has quite a balanced diet and they're having things like hard, crunchy carrots just to help develop their jaws a little bit more.
Yeah, or even, you know, I appreciate not everyone eats meat for a variety of different reasons, but if you do, you know, trying to get that meat off the bone.
Yeah.
That's, again, you're giving it a mechanical stimulus. You know, it's going to have an impact on your bone health in your mouth, your dental health. It's pretty remarkable. Hey guys, I really hope you're finding this useful. If you are and you want more content like it, please do check out my book, Make Change That Lasts, 9 Simple Ways to Break Free from the Habits That Are Holding You Back. It's in all the usual places as a paperback, ebook, and as an audiobook, which I'm narrating. Now, back to the video. Let's go back to this this relationship between the mouth and the rest of the body. Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating. I've heard you talk before about the link between our oral health and our fertility, and for men, erectile dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So could you talk about some of those statistics? What is that relationship? Because I think it just really highlights just how linked the health of the mouth is to the health of the rest of the body.
So for women, there's actually been a lot of research to show that women will actually start to get gum issues during pregnancy. It's a very common side effect of pregnancy. It's what we call pregnancy gingivitis. And if that is not under control, and if we go back to my spectrum of like very healthy gums, and then you've got your inflammation, bleeding gums, if that's not gotten under control, then that can become gum disease. And research has found that in women who do have gum disease and are pregnant, that they're at a significantly higher chance of preterm birth and low birth weight of their babies.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's quite a strong, it's an easy thing again to treat. So I'd always recommend for patients who are pregnant that they come and have a hygiene every 3 months. Even if they think their gums are great, just come and have a hygiene. It's worth it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so that's the link between it and preterm birth.
Yeah.
You mentioned some sort of hormonal associations there. What about menstruating women in their cycle? Does the health of their gums change throughout?
So I wish I had more answers on that. And it upsets me that I don't, because there's not enough research on it. There's very little research on on menstruation mouth or on menopause mouth, which is really sad. I would say anecdotally, I see a lot of women who are particularly perimenopause and menopause who start to get gum disease, or they get gum recession, and the consistency of their gums changes a little bit.
Wow.
They also might get lots of ulcers. And then one that menopausal women often suffer from is burning mouth syndrome. And it's a really horrible syndrome or symptom. It's basically their mouth feels like it's constantly on fire. And we don't see anything in their mouth, but they often can't eat a lot of foods. They are constantly in pain. Even brushing their teeth can hurt them. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, we don't even have a solution or a cure for this. Wow. And we don't even know how it's caused. But there are so many women who have it. The only thing that has been shown is that sometimes if a woman in her perimenopausal stage controls her hormones better, maybe through HRT or whatnot, there has been shown to be a lower chance of that woman getting burning mouth syndrome when she's menopausal. Okay. So maybe that's suggesting that the hormonal fluctuations increases the risk of burning mouth syndrome. But yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be more research into that.
Yeah, there needs to be. It like really, because at the moment, all that we recommend is often patients are put on antidepressants, and that will help with their pain. But I just think this is just a personal thing. I just think that's just wild. That's not fair to tell a woman who's menopausal to take antidepressants because her mouth feels like it's on fire and we can't see it. So I really hope that there's more research that comes out.
What about the relationship between our oral microbiome and a woman's ability to get pregnant?
So there has been some research to show that if a woman has gum disease pre-pregnancy, that it will take her approximately 2 months longer to conceive a child. And that's to do with the kind of hormonal fluctuations again, and also inflammation.
Wow. There's also links between a man's ability to be fertile and their oral health, right? Which is, again, when we start to really absorb this idea that the body is interconnected, it all starts to make sense. I'm not sure many people would still make the link between male fertility and the health of their mouth, though.
Yeah, so the most kind of common, or the biggest one, is that men who have gum disease are 2.85 times more likely to have erectile dysfunction. And that's to do with certain oral bacteria. They release kind of enzymes and inflammatory markers. And these can travel through the blood vessels, and they can impact how your blood vessels dilate and constrict, and therefore how much blood travels to parts of your body. So that is the underpinning mechanism for things like cardiovascular disease, where blood is not, traveling to the heart, and also erectile dysfunction, where blood is just not traveling to the penis as well as it should. And then in terms of fertility, so there has been some research where they have looked at men who are subfertile, and they've done a oral examination on them, and they found that over 90% of those men had some sorts of oral disease, be it gum disease, decay, an infected wisdom tooth, whatever it is. They split that group into two. Half the group had the treatment that they needed to resolve that infection. And then after 6 months, there was a 70% improved pregnancy outcome with the half that had the oral disease sorted out, compared to the half that had not had their oral disease sorted out.
Wow. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. And they showed also an improvement in spermatic parameters. So the quality and the motility of the sperm also improved when the periodontal disease or any other oral disease was improved as well.
Yeah. This whole idea of this interconnection between all the different parts of the body it's just profound. We know in medicine that if a man starts to complain of erectile dysfunction, it could be the first sign of coronary artery disease. Okay, so we're trained to know that if that's happening, we must also screen them for, coronary heart disease risk factors, blood pressure, do the blood tests, all that kind of stuff. Because again, we're talking about blood vessels and the blood vessels in the heart, blood vessels, other parts of your body, the health of them is not completely separate.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you said at the start, right? For me, this idea that the mouth and the body are not separate, but it goes bigger than that for me. For all the advances in modern allopathic medicine, of which there have been many incredible ones, I think one of the weaknesses is the separation between mouth and body, but even within the body, between heart and lungs and kidneys and guts.
Yeah.
We have specialists for all of these different organs.
Yeah.
And it's just really clear when you look at the science, actually, these things are all linked.
Yeah.
Things don't happen just in one part in isolation.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, massively. I think it's a really big issue with modern healthcare, I think, is that we are all stuck in our own little bubbles of our specialties. And you're totally right. If we want to really achieve full body health for a patient, we need to be looking at every single system and organ in the body and try and get everything to be connected.
Yeah. And you do that in your clinic, don't you?
We try. It's hard. We have tried to integrate a lot of medicine into the dental practice. So we do blood tests, IV drips. We do gut and oral microbiome testing. We have a nutritionist. We have a functional medicine doctor. We are trying to, again, just put the mouth back into the body and connect everything.
Patients must love that, I would imagine.
They do, yeah. I mean, I would say from our side, running the clinic, it's logistically very difficult.
Yeah.
And part of that is, for example, like NHS hospital records, the medical and the dental are not integrated.
Yeah.
And it's like the amount of research that you could get to connect the dental and medical together would be phenomenal. And it's just things like that where, so instead we have to sit there, even our dental booking systems, we can't integrate medical into it. So we have to have two different booking systems it's just the way that our society is that it's two separate things.
Yeah. The mouth is the window, isn't it, into the rest of the body?
Yeah. So what we're trying to also do at the clinic is like kind of create a hub where we can collect lots of data and try and strengthen that mouth-body connection. So during checkups, we have the option to check patients' blood pressure. We check their blood glucose levels, their vitamin D levels, and also obviously their microbiome as well.
But that's really fun, right? When I say fun, I mean, that's really exciting because what it means, if I think about it through the eyes of a patient, you're coming in, let's say, because there's a problem with your tooth, right? So, okay, I've neglected my health for years, my gut health, my oral health. So I'm going to go and see a dentist. But just the fact that you then offer blood testing and blood pressure and all this other stuff, it's starting to put in the mind of the patient that my mouth health is not just about my mouth health.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is brand new information for a lot of people.
It is. And even when we do a checkup, a lot of the time we say, like, medically, is there anything that we need to know about? Are you on any medications? And previously, a lot of patients would be like, oh, it's nothing that you'd need to know about. And I'd be like, what does that mean? And then it turns out I checked their medical history and they have diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. They have everything.
But it works both ways. I would argue that the medical profession actually perhaps needs to be educated more about just how important dental health is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because I'm pretty sure in a lot of type 2 diabetic consultations, I'm sure there'll be some clinicians who are doing this, but in many consultations, they're not also being told about their mouth health. So this is something I'm really passionate about. When that patient is sitting in front of you as a doctor, you may only get them once, right? So how you interact with them, the language you use, whether it's empowering or disempowering, the tools that you offer to them, you may only get one hit.
Yeah.
So I've always taken that really seriously. You must be very careful what you're saying. And even if you tell them about their blood sugar results, but say, hey, listen, there's a strong association with your oral health. When did you last go and see the dentist?
Yeah.
You may not be able to do anything about that as a doctor, but just dropping it into their heads means that they walk out, they get their car, they're driving to work and thinking, blood sugar, but yeah, actually, you know what? I haven't checked.
Yeah.
I haven't gone to the dentist for 2 years. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's so, so important.
Yeah. And on the flip side, from our side, as a dentist, we often will see patients much more regularly than they will see their doctor. Because unfortunately, most people go to the doctor when they're sick. But they should be going to the dentist for a 6-monthly checkup or for their hygiene. So if we can pick up things in the dental setting, such as high blood pressure or elevated blood glucose levels, and refer that patient effectively to their doctor, then we can actually flag those issues before they become real problems and treat it.
And this oral microbiome testing that you offer, I know you're involved with creating an oral microbiome test. You're very motivated. You really want to make a difference and actually get this out there to people, which is really exciting. I've got mine sitting at home. I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm going to do it because I can't wait to see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
For people who've heard this conversation and are thinking, actually, I wouldn't mind doing it, do they have to book in to see you, or can they just go online and get it done themselves?
So actually, you can go online and get it done yourself, and it will give you a beautiful snapshot of what's going on inside your mouth at that moment. We do always recommend that you do go and visit your dentist or hygienist after getting these results. And often, so I check every single patient's results and I write my own clinical comment at the top of it. So it does not replace the need to go to your dentist, but it might urge you or push you to go to your dentist. And it can kind of empower you to have more understanding of what's going on inside your mouth.
And for people who do want to, take advantage of that, which, I'm sure a lot of people probably haven't heard of oral microbiome testing, right? So where do they go? What's the website?
So the test is called Oralis 1.
So that's ORALIS.
Yeah.
1. Oralis 1. Okay.
Yeah. And the website is thslabs.co.uk.
Okay, so people can go there. So that's a UK address. People listen to this show all over the world. Can people get it in different countries, or is it just UK at the moment?
At the moment, just UK, but actually we're hoping by beginning of January we'll be expanding. So we've got a waiting list. So even if you can't buy it right now, send us an email or inquire, and we can put you on the waiting list and let you know when we're open.
And from what you've seen so far, I mean, first of all, how long has this specific test been around for?
So we launched it mid-October. So we've been working on it for 2 years or so, but launched mid-October.
Okay. And just so I'm being fully thorough in this conversation, what would critics of the test or oral microbiome testing say? Or do you know?
Yeah, I do. Oh, they're shouting it hard and loud.
Because I think it's always nice to talk about this, because then you can address it, basically.
I really appreciate that. So I would say some critics have an issue with they say that, okay, fine, you can test your oral microbiome, but what are you going to do about it? How is that going to change the treatment that your dentist might provide to you? And my argument for that is that we give you recommendations in terms of maybe supplements, or we've worked with nutritionists and functional medicine practitioners on lifestyle improvements as well for your gum health. But we are not saying that we are going to cure your gum disease through using a mouthwash. So you still do need to see your dentist, and you still need to have maybe the traditional treatment that you normally would, but we would supplement that with potentially lifestyle, food, nutrition choices, or even just fine-tuning your oral products. So telling you what toothpaste would work best for you. The sole kind of aim of this test is really a communication tool and to empower patients to understand more about their oral health. And this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, that patients are scared of going to their dentist. They don't trust us. They don't understand what is going on in their mouth and how important it is for the rest of their body. And in my opinion, Oralis One answers all of those questions for a patient.
There's a range of people who listen to a podcast like mine. There is a subset of listeners who are really, really motivated about their health, right? So they want to know everything. They really want to look after themselves and, make those 1% gains or whatever it might be to keep themselves well for as long as they can. I'd probably put myself into that category. So I hear a test like that and I'm like, first of all, I'm doing it, right? So thank you for bringing up that kit, right? I'm definitely going to do it. And I'll encourage my wife to do it as well. Okay, so, and then let's say I get the test done, right? And let's say some imbalances are identified. Is it the sort of thing, or is it too early to know, where I can then make some changes, apply some of the recommendations, and then in 6 months' time, recheck to see if there has been a change in my oral microbiome?
Yes, and that's why for anyone who's thinking, why is she named the test Oralis 1? It's because Oralis 2 is going to be coming out soon, and that's a retest tool. So the Oralis 1, it looks at over 500 different bacteria. It zooms into the top 20 bacteria that we know are associated with gum disease, decay, bad breath. And then we also zoom in even more into the strain levels of the certain bacteria that we know are really, really bad. So going back to the Alzheimer's, we're talking about P. gingivalis, and it releases these gingipanes. We look for those gingipanes. We also look at genetic mutations. So we look at 10 genetic mutations that we know will make a patient more inflammatory, increase their risk of gum disease, make their saliva more acidic, which means they have a higher chance of decay. And that's for Oralis 1. Oralis 2, we cut out all the mutations. We don't need to retest those. Nothing's going to change. But we look at the strain levels, the bacteria, and the ratio of all of your bacteria to see whether or not the recommendations we've given you have indeed improved your oral health.
And I guess also for early adopters who want to get involved with this, can I say new technology? Because it feels new to me. I spend my life thinking about health and talking about health, and this feels like a new something I haven't really heard that much about yet. I guess you guys are also going to be doing research, right? So as people retest and as this develops, in 5 years' time, if you're sitting here having this conversation with me, I suspect if we mirror what's happened in gut health, not only would the amount of research explode like it did with gut health, but you'll probably have a much more nuanced understanding, I guess, of how often should we test? You know, what's the optimum for a certain patient? What recommendations are consistently working for everyone, which might mean some people don't even need a test. Do you know what I mean? I think it's still early days, right?
It is early days, yeah. And we're working with dental professionals at the same time. So they're actually providing the testing to their patients, and they're funneling back information on what their findings are. We have a team of biostatisticians who are looking at all of the data and trying to actually find correlations and connections. And then that will give us new areas that we can research. And we are also connected to a couple of universities where we're going to be starting to do some research trials with those places, because the issue with the oral microbiome is just there's not as much research about it than there is the gut microbiome. And I think that we have a beautiful hub of information and data, and we're already seeing some crazy things like musculoskeletal disorders. So we have a lot of patients who have certain musculoskeletal disorders, and they weirdly keep on having the same oral biomarkers. All of them have the same biomarkers in their saliva. So it's things like that where it's like we're super early days, but there's some really exciting and promising things coming out.
Before we finished, can you just mention a case that I've heard you talk about before? And this really speaks to this link. Again, I know we keep hammering home this point, but it's important, right? The mouth is the gateway to the rest of the body.
Yes.
You're talking about this bi-directional link between the mouth and many areas of the body. We haven't really gone into autoimmunity. We touched on it a little bit, but I believe there was a case where you saw someone with rheumatoid arthritis and you managed to help them in perhaps quite an unexpected way. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
definitely. Even myself, I was not fully convinced of every single mouth-body connection. And is there really going to be such a huge improvement in their general health if I improve their oral health? And so I do treat a lot of patients who have rheumatoid arthritis. And I have a lot of rheumatologists who refer their patients to me. And so there was one patient in particular, was my first patient who I'd done any work with. And she was under the care of a rheumatologist and a functional medicine practitioner. And she had been seeing multiple functional medicine practitioners, and she was on a ton of steroids, and she was really not happy. And so she finally went to this guy, and this guy was the first one to say, when was the last time you went to the dentist? How's your oral health? She was like, oh, I've had like 6 teeth taken out in the last year. And he was like, that's not normal. Like, you shouldn't be having 6 teeth pulled out. So he was like, look, I have a friend called Victoria. Will you go and see her? She likes testing people's saliva and doing weird things. So like, maybe you could just meet her. So obviously I tested all her saliva, did everything. And she had really bad gum disease. And we did a lot of treatment on her. We helped improve her gum disease. We stabilized it completely. And actually, after that, about 6 months later, she was able to get off her steroid medication and be medication free. And her rheumatoid arthritis improved significantly. So it's not to say that, I cured her and it was amazing, but I think that with most diseases, they're so multifactorial. Yeah. And this was a really big piece of the puzzle for her.
For her.
Yeah, exactly, for her. And no one had addressed that. And just by addressing it, her general systemic inflammation reduced to a point where she was able to get off medications.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a powerful case study that gives hope to people. But beyond that, there is that wider point, which again, I just think we miss so much. Like, we look at all of these separate diseases as separate entities without realizing that a lot of the time it's the same risk factors that in different people manifest in different symptoms and different diseases. We've all got a genetic predisposition to certain things. And if, let's say, through the lens of the 4 pillars, if your food is off, your movement's off, your sleep's off, and your stress is off, over time, that is going to create in some people symptoms and then disease.
Yeah.
And what disease you end up getting from those imbalances will hugely be influenced by your genetic predispositions.
Yes.
And therefore, although we study these diseases as separate, the way I practiced for many years was to go, well, what are the root causes? Let's look at all of these root causes and see which ones we can address in an individual patient. And for that person, gum health, oral health was a big driver of inflammation.
Yeah.
Right? It might not be for someone else.
Yeah.
So someone else with rheumatoid arthritis who's got really good gums, for example, they may not see an improvement.
Yeah.
But for that person, it did.
Definitely, yeah, 100%.
And I kind of think we miss this so much in medicine. Victoria, it's been so wonderful speaking to you. I think you're doing something phenomenal. And even creating this oral microbiome test, I know it's early days yet, but it's really exciting. If we see where gut health has gone over the last 10 years, it's exciting for me to think, well, where might, oral health and oral microbiome testing be in 10 years? If people want to follow you online, where's the best place to go?
Probably Instagram. So that's just Dr Victoria Sampson.
Okay.
Or our clinic, which is the Health Society Mayfair.
Okay, fantastic. And then lastly, if someone's stumbled across this conversation and it's dawned on them that they simply have not taken their oral health seriously, and the penny has dropped today and they thought, actually, you know what? I need to sort this out.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you advise them to do?
Book an appointment with their dentist and their hygienist. I might be a bit biased. Come over to our clinic. We'll also check your blood pressure and we'll check a few other things for you. But if you're not ready to come to your dentist yet, even just some of those really simple things that we've talked about, brushing twice a day, 2 minutes, spit, don't rinse, rinse water out after you've eaten a meal. Those are all small steps into a better direction. And once you're ready, then you can come and visit your dentist or your hygienist, or you can do an oral microbiome test and start your journey.
Dr. Victoria Sampson, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed that conversation, then I think you are really going to enjoy this one that I picked out especially.
When you consume sugar, you are poisoning your mitochondria. Sugar and cyanide do the same thing. This is the toxin.